Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 90, a stroppy professor's guide to Poststructuralism. Now, this vlog also links with our previous week's vlog on a stroppy professor's guide to theory, but let me tell you how we got here. A wonderful student at Flinders University by the name of Tara, she's the real Tara, I'm just her friend, but this wonderful student Tara works in speech pathology, and I've got to know Tara this year, and she's a wonderful scholar, a real innovator. I think the future of higher education is safe with this truly amazing scholar. But I've got to know Tara through the year, and it's very clear to me that the allied health professions are really burgeoning, interesting, theoretical, political, social, intellectual spaces in higher education. And as I've been working with Tara through the year, she said to me, I think about 6 weeks ago, wasn't it, Tara, what do you think my theoretical perspective is? And her project's fascinating because she's working in speech pathology, but she's also engaging with many different theories of education, teaching and learning and development. And so when I was reading her work, I said, Tara, I think you might be a post-structuralist. And so she did some reading around post-structuralism and said, I think you might be right, but could you do a vlog, just sort of a 20-minute, quick and dirty, what is post-structuralism, to just shape and guide my interpretation of this particular theoretical perspective, because she'd never done an hour, has never done a lecture, never done a tutorial or a seminar in all her degrees on post-structuralism. So she wanted something to frame and shape and guide her through this very interesting reading. So it is really my incredible pleasure to do so. This is very exciting for me. I haven't done anything like this in some years, so I'm excited to be talking about post-structuralism. And why I love talking about post-structuralism is most of the time people who talk about post-structuralism have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. But it has incredible relevance for so many disciplines, so many tropes, so many paradigms, that it's amazing to me that it's sort of shrunken back into critical theory literary studies in the last 10 years. And for me, post-structuralism at its best is bold and big and exciting and powerful and edgy, and certainly shouldn't be sort of limited to a very small area of a university, like people who protect this knowledge like no one else can use it. Well, that's nonsense, and today we're going to do the Stroppy Professor's Guide to Post-Structuralism. Now, particularly for the allied health professions, and I've got so many friends throughout the university who are working in allied health, I think this really has some potential for you in managing the radical interdisciplinarity of the allied health professions. So Tara, this one is for you. I've loved getting to know you this year. You're very special. You're a great human being. Let's see if I can help you and others with post-structuralism. So this vlog today has 2 parts, very simple. I'm going to just talk about what is post-structuralism, and the last little bit of the vlog is, whatever your discipline, how could post-structuralism help enable, challenge the work that you do? So 2 very simple systems. Right, so let's start with the very easy question. What is post-structuralism? Now, the key truth right at the start is anybody who, when they're talking about what is post-structuralism, talks about postmodernism as well, those people have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. So it's a real proxy for that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Post-structuralism and postmodernism are completely different entities. Do not confuse them. I'm not even going to talk about postmodernism today because it's not relevant. Just not relevant. Sweep that away. Let's talk about post-structuralism. The relationship that we need to focus on when we're dealing with post-structuralism is structuralism and post-structuralism. So that's the intellectual journey we're going on today. So let's start with structuralism, and the most basic foundation of structuralism is it's a system of meaning production that is predictable and understandable. So it is, if you like, a system of meaning generation that is predictable and understandable. So, if you will, language that we're using now is a meaning mechanism. When I use the word hello, you know what I'm saying. I'm going, hello, welcome. So we all agree with those predictable understandings of language. Now, structuralism treats language as if it is a predictable science. Indeed, a large suite, a method within structuralism is called semiotics. And semiotics was described as the science of signs. The science of signs. So the primary theorist of structuralism was and is Ferdinand de Saussure. And he developed these models and tropes in early to mid-European history. The argument is that the units of language are arbitrary in their meaning, but the arbitrariness of language is reduced when systems are in place. So that sounds quite complicated. Let me show you what that means. So we have the word cat, okay? So think about cat. There's a cat, right? That's a unit of language, a unit of meaning that is a bit ambiguous, but it stabilizes and fixes in its meaning. It is rendered predictable when that word cat is placed in a system of meaning. So other words exist with it, like dog, cat, dog, cat, hat. So every word has that system of other words around it, and that system renders meaning predictable. So this means the arbitrariness of a single unit of meaning that sometimes can be referred to as a signifier, is stabilized in its meaning when it enters a meaning system. Okay, so the meaning system gives each individual little bit in it stability and predictability. Boom. So structuralism studies how meanings are predictable and meanings are structured. Cool. It also treats all human culture like a language, so where meaning can be structured and determined. So whether we're talking about food and cooking, whether we're talking about sport, whether we're talking about language, all human culture is dealt with in this way: structured, predictable, meaningful. Okay, so that's structuralism. Cool. Post-structuralism reveals that meaning is not predictable, that meaning is not fixed, and that it is contingent, and meaning is really, really, really unstable. Okay. Now, post-structuralism has a series of parts, methods, tropes, paradigms within it. It is not one thing. The best known bit of post-structuralism is deconstruction. Deconstruction. Deconstruction is associated with one scholar in particular, Jacques Derrida. Derrida did a lot in his career, but he is really known for the brilliance of one argument and one idea. Now, he agreed with structuralist theorists that meaning was determined via difference. So he agreed. That was the structuralist point. Meaning is determined via difference. But Derrida went a step further. Yes, meaning is determined via difference, but meaning is always deferred. So difference, but deferred. So this means that meanings are never fixed. We might have a notion in our head about what a cat is, but that fixity of meaning sort of gets spilled beyond what we think because it's never actually stable. So it's determined by difference, but the meaning is deferred. So that means that meanings for us are only arbitrarily fixed in a particular context. So meanings are never intrinsic, they are contextually determined. So when the context changes, so does the meaning. Okay. Now, Tara, you are absolutely right in realising that when you applied particular words or concepts in speech pathology, and then you moved it to education and particularly early years learning, the meaning of those concepts started to change. And you handled that magnificently, and that is a post-structural realisation. So therefore, post-structuralism can help all of us manage how words, how terms, how ideas move and change between disciplines. Structuralism worked through the construction of binary oppositions. So that means male, female, black, white, straight, gay. Binary oppositions, right? The meaning of each of those terms is determined by their relationship, their difference. Got it? Binary oppositions. Now, post-structuralists went, yeah, cool, whatever, binary oppositions, but they also recognised the liminality. So in between those binary poles is liminality, is ambiguity. So what exists between straight and gay and black and white, and those in-between spaces, and that instability creates a lot of real great interest and political challenge. So this is where, for example, post-colonialism starts to form an interesting relationship with post-structuralism. So coloniser, colonised. And in a post-colonial environment, those in-between negotiations, discussions about language, religion, tradition, faith structures, land, those debates start to become really volatile and interesting. So this means right now in Australia, we're really thinking through what it means to be post-colonial, coloniser, colonised, black, white. And they are really unstable conversations and probably quite productive ones. So deconstruction recognises the arbitrariness of meaning by inverting what Derrida described as, quote, violent hierarchies, end of quote. Great phrase, violent hierarchies. Let me explain what that means. So today, right now, all of us have assumptions about masculinity and femininity. There's that binary pole again, masculinity and femininity. Now, Derrida argued that men and women, masculinity and femininity, are in a violent hierarchy. So right now we live, that's the nature of patriarchy, no worries. The nature of patriarchy is that the violent hierarchy means that the masculine is valued over the feminine. Right, so masculine stuff, connotations, ideologies, vibes, narratives, whatever you want to talk about it, masculine stuff is valued over feminine stuff. That's the violent hierarchy. But that's not always the case, is it? And it is a bit of an unstable discussion to be having because women, the feminine, is changing quite radically. So women are doing all sorts of stuff like divorcing men and doing full-time work and not having children. So that's rendering that very stable supposed relationship between men and women really volatile, and that violent hierarchy becomes unstable. Now, in the last couple of weeks, we've moved through another example of that in contemporary Australia with the equal marriage, same-sex marriage debate. So again, that binary opposition, straight and gay. And yet what we've been going through is arguing for marriage equality so that gay and lesbian people can marry. Now, if you think about the binary opposition there, a lot of the phrasing has been same-sex marriage. So that's one of the poles, same-sex marriage. What's the other bit of the binary opposition? Different sex marriage. So this one is so taken for granted, so normalised, we don't even use the phrase. So the violent hierarchy is so violent that we never actually have to use this word and phrase at all. So again, you can see the volatility of what's going on here. So these liminal and in-between conversations create social change. They also create social instability because if you think about the same-sex marriage debate, some deeply held beliefs about religion, about common sense, about history are suddenly up in the air. So Judith Butler, who is a pretty famous feminist post-structuralist scholar, went so far as to argue there is nothing stable or predictable about gender, masculinity and femininity. She used the verb that it is performed. I have some critiques with that, but that masculinity is performed, femininity is performed, and the meaning of being a man or a woman is endlessly deferred. So yes, male, female, masculine, feminine, those binary poles, but those meanings post-deconstruction are endlessly deferred. So, I have some critiques with Judith Butler, but very powerful argument, remarkable scholar. But if you think about it, for all the guys out there, hi guys, for all the women out there, have a think about it in your own life, right? I actually, to be frank with you, have no sense at all, none, about what a woman is or what femininity is. My mother taught me stuff that being a woman involved wearing a dress and putting on makeup and, you know, doing some cooking and some cleaning. And I do all of those things. So, you know, that's the nature of being a woman, supposedly. But I actually have no sense at all about what a woman is or what a woman does. So therefore the meaning is certainly not fixed, and yes, it is deferred. I also want to mention one other really interesting violent hierarchy that's emerging in the literature in the last 5-10 years that I've just discovered as an interdisciplinary paradigm, and it is fascinating. This interesting field of animal studies. I'm really embarrassed that I only discovered it like last year. Remarkable, interesting field, and it's trying to show the arbitrariness of the relationship between human and animal, inverting the binary opposition. So when we invert it, so male, female, human, animal, when we invert the binary oppositions, we reveal the arbitrariness of the meaning systems attached to it. So for example, men play sport. Men play sport. Well, women play sport. And so therefore, what's the role and relationship between men and sport? So invert it, render it a bit weird, a bit ambiguous, a bit liminal, and it starts to challenge the foundations of thought. Okay, so structuralism was descriptive. It described how meaning was created, but post-structuralism is historical. It demonstrates how meaning exists and transforms in particular contexts. So the best exemplar of this historical view of post-structuralism, and you knew we'd go there, is Michel Foucault. Foucault's Madness and Civilization is one of the truly great books of the 20th century. I have a lot of critiques of Foucault, as a lot of you that know my work know, but you've got to give credit here. Madness and Civilization was an incredible book, and he explored that violent hierarchy, that binary opposition between sane and mad. Sane and mad. And he showed that the men and the women who bucked the system, who challenged the system, were called mad, and they were institutionalized. So because they challenged the normal, they were unstable in terms of challenging ideologies, they had to be removed from normal socialization and separated from society. Very powerful argument. So as you can see, post-structuralism is more than deconstruction. Deconstruction at its most basic is a technique of inversion and meaning deferral. Inversion and meaning deferral. That's what deconstruction is. So post-structuralism has been deployed very differently by different scholars, whether we are dealing with Derrida, whether we're dealing with Butler, Foucault, and even, I'm going to mention the two scholars I do a lot of work on, Baudrillard and also Althusser. There are elements, marinades of their work that can be deployed in post-structuralism, but much more complicated relationships to investigate that I can do in a 20-minute vlog. But those of you that would like that first gentle step into post-structuralism after my vlog today, so, okay, well, can I read one simple thing that can just show me something? And the answer is yes, you can. So I recommend the work of one scholar, the legendary Roland Barthes, B-A-R-T-H-E-S, Roland Barthes. Magnificent scholar, such a powerful, evocative writer, magnificent writer in French, and thankfully his translations have also been excellent. So if you put into Google Roland Barthes and you seek out his 1967 essay, The Death of the Author. The Death of the Author. It's freely available as a PDF if you put that into Google. Now he argued in The Death of the Author, always good when the title gives the argument, that the author is dead. What he actually meant was, though, that the authentic singular meanings of a text are dead. So I write a lot of books and a lot of articles, and I can tell you what those books and those articles are about. Let me tell you about my book, blah, blah, blah. But Barthes argues, actually, we're not hugely interested in what the author thinks. The author is one view of what that book or that text was about. And you know what? I'm much more interested in what the readers, the audience, think of that book or that article or that text more generally. So the death of the author created the birth of the reader, the birth of the audience, and with it the diversity of approaches, the diversity of meaning systems that come from that determination. Okay, so we've got some definitions in place of post-structuralism. Hopefully you've got something there to hold on to, rock and roll. And I hope whatever your discipline, there might just be something there that you find a little bit challenging, a little bit interesting, that might give you a paragraph in your introduction or conclusion, or might just spark you, even if you completely disagree with it, to think about why you disagree with it. So why should we care about post-structuralism now? Let me give you a couple of arguments. Firstly, post-structuralism confirms that there's no singular way, strategy or mode to read or understand any text, context, event or indeed experiment. So we need to understand the reader, we need to understand the audience, we need to understand the context and recognise that every single situation and event and text has multiple interpretations of it. Wow. Secondly, post-structuralism is a critique of hierarchies. And this is the really powerful bit, I think. So the idea that literature or chemistry or engineering or law has intrinsic value that's above and beyond other paradigms and disciplines, that's really critiqued. There is an argument that value is given in a particular context and does not transgress that context. So therefore we as scholars, we as researchers have to reflect on our assumptions and make an argument about our disciplines and our paradigms rather than assume those arguments. Thirdly, as you may have worked out, post-structuralism is disruptive. It's meant to agitate you. It's meant to frustrate you. It's meant to make you feel a bit unstable. And that's the point. So, for example, for the wonderful guys that watch these vlogs, hello guys, when I maybe did that sort of gender 3 minutes there, you might have gone, well, look, yeah, there are some things that's what a woman is and that's what a man is, and I'm cool with that, you know. And the point is it's meant to create a bit of, using Butler, gender trouble. It's meant to agitate you, get in your face a bit and make you think about, well, who am I? You know, who am I as a scholar? Who am I as a person? How is that changing? You know, what's going on here? So that reflection is incredibly powerful for a scholar. And you've maybe got to be a little bit agitated, a little bit disrupted to really go deep in that reflection. And for example, for law, legal theory and criminology, hi to all our wonderful crew in law, legal studies and criminology, you can see the incredible value of post-structuralism here, because it's a movement away from black letter law and through to law in context, if I could use that great old phrase, or socio-legal studies. So post-structuralism was one of the engines of movement and change, particularly in law. So for scholars, I think, post-structuralism encourages us to engage in really productive thought experiments, to critique, following on from Butler, any assumptions about universal values or universal knowledges. In this paradigm, everything is contingent. Everything is contingent. And of course that has a whole series of critiques as well. And that's great, go with that. You know, the idea that everything's contingent, that's a really uncomfortable way of moving through the world, isn't it? But again, the thought experiments from that maxim are quite powerful. And finally, and this is the other really powerful thought experiment that post-structuralism encourages to do, is post-structuralism applies over-determination. Over-determination. So over-determination is an epistemology that's based on the argument that theory is not separated from reality, and reality is not separated from theory. Now remember our vlog last week on theory, theoria, the ancient Greek, there was a separation between theory and what we're looking at. Now post-structuralism critiques that. Over-determination suggests that our theory of the world is actually our reality of the world. Our theory of the world, what we think is going on, is actually our reality. And that's called over-determination. So as scholars, that's quite powerful because it means we never have to deny who we are, because our theory of the world is actually how we view the world. So we can't deny ourselves in our scholarship because that's our worldview. That's how we come to knowledge. There is, I think, as Foucault argued very strongly, a genealogy of knowledge. So what we think of as knowledge, what we think of as valuable knowledge, is activated by mechanisms of power. And I'll just make an obvious argument to you. So those in power claim particular knowledge systems, particular disciplines as being of value. And they discredit others, they discredit the assumptions, the values, the standards that go into those other disciplines. So for example, national governments around the world decide we are going to put funding on these particular paradigms and disciplines and not others, often called national priorities, for example. That's a great example of saying these knowledge systems are of value to us, these knowledge systems are not, and funding is a way in which that's done. But also that valuable knowledge is determined via accreditation structures, degrees, examinations, grants, titles, fellowships, and indeed promotions. All the systems and the structures, for example, in universities determine these particular knowledge systems are of value and these ones are not. It does change, but please remember, it does change. Poststructuralism does not stop hierarchies, but it does remind us all, I think, that there are other ways of thinking, and indeed there are other ways of knowing. And Tara and all the other wonderful scholars out there who are probing and challenging disciplinary parameters, I wish you every success with doing that, and maybe there's a little bit of post-structuralism that can enable your research. I wish you all love, light and peace. Tea out.